Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the LEFIT Y2. This is a budget-oriented smartwatch which sells for only around $35, which is very inexpensive. In fact, it might be one of the cheapest smartwatches that has an integrated GPS chip. And when you come back and sync the information, you'll be able to see on a map exactly where you were going. So it's a very neat function to see on such a low-cost device. And LEFIT also claims that this watch comes with a variety of different custom watch faces. The watch also claims to last up to 5 days on a single charge. It is a very basic smartwatch though, so it's not going to be a competitor to, say, an Android Wear watch when it comes to running more complicated apps, but it will show you basic notifications, incoming calls, reminders, and also meant for, again, tracking your steps, your route, as well as your heart rate, and also sleep. And like other wearables these days, of course, it's fully waterproof, rated to be IP68. Here's what we get inside. So it comes detached in terms of the band, as you can see, which is removable. You can also change it out for other styles. It uses a standard 42mm size, and it also comes with an instruction manual as well as the charging cable, which is using a magnetic pogo contact. So essentially it latches onto the rear like this, and it offers a pretty tight connection. So here's the Y2's body itself. There's actually a screen protector film on the very top that we can peel off. And what's neat here is we do have slightly curved edges on the glass that's protecting the screen underneath. And again, this is fully touch sensitive. It's an IPS LCD display. And on the rear here, we have 2 crown keys. On the rear, we do have the optical heart rate sensor. And the body here is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic. At the same time, this is going to be much smaller and lighter compared to something like the TicWatch Pro, which is a much chunkier device. So after launching on Connect, we're going to put the QR code in front of the camera here. And after reading that in, it should connect itself using Bluetooth. As you can see here, pairing success. And by default, it's actually going to give it a progress or update for the firmware or software of the watch. It's actually very quick though, so that's at least done pretty well, and there's some tutorials also on the watch that tell us how to use it. So it seems like the software experience is a little bit better than some of the other cheaper generic watches that we've seen in the past for around the same price. They've put a bit more attention into making the UI at least go through a process of helping you understand the features. We have some quick tips. It tells us how to use the watch. Swipe down to see notifications, swipe up to see quick settings, left and right to go between applications, and we are done. First impressions, the display does get fairly bright, although there is a bottom chin or bezel, which is a little bit larger than the top area. That doesn't give it the most symmetrical design, but overall it still is fairly elegant. Again, the curved edges of the glass make it a little bit better in terms of swiping, feels pretty smooth, and the display will time out after a few seconds, going into a dimmer setting just to conserve on battery, which is kind of interesting. Long hold on this main home screen here to change the watch face, and we can swipe back and forth between a few different designs. The contrast in terms of the black of the background is actually done very well, so it almost looks like it's an AMOLED display, but in fact it is an LCD IPS panel, and shows you kind of different options, including one here that gives you reminders and notifications of events, which is kind of neat. There's one here that will tell you your distance as well as the current temperature of the day as well, and some other ones here that have a kind of funky layout. Reminds me of tiles on Windows 8 or Windows Phone back in the days. Most of these are going to be digital watch faces, and some of them are very simplified but look quite elegant and sporty. But there's a few other ones here that have a background, so it doesn't give you any analog watch faces, which is kind of interesting. So there's no crown in a circular shape like some of the other watches. They're all kind of in this digital format, but they all look pretty neat and attractive overall. As far as the other applications here, we have the basic activity throughout the past 24 hours in terms of distance walked, calories burned, and we can also swipe down to take a look at more visualizations specific to, say, steps, your active duration time, calories, and you can also edit, of course, the goals in terms of how many steps you want to take using the companion app. To go back, you can swipe over from the edge of the screen, and that will kind of go back by one page, similar to other smartwatches we've seen. There's also a breathing app that we have here that kind of helps you meditate or calm down, and there's going to be a circle that expands and contracts, and you can breathe in and breathe out to match the kind of circle here. And there's also additional settings here that we can take a look at. The menu here is kind of interesting. You can even change the text size, which is a pretty neat feature, and turn on or off GPS tracking if you're doing a workout and running outdoors, for example. And under other options here, in terms of the brightness, we are at the maximum right now. We can also dim it to make it conserve battery a little bit more. Different gestures, like flicking up your wrist to wake up the display, as well as the screen timeout. You can save it to be longer. And there's even a night mode as well as an always on mode, which is interesting. So in terms of the always on mode, it's basically going to continuously keep the screen lit, just a little bit dimmer, and you get to see your info at all times. Otherwise, we have the basic functions like a stopwatch that offers kinetic scrolling, so it feels pretty smooth. Overall, actually not bad and working pretty well. There's also the weather application that you can take a look at and showing you the condition at the current time. Of course, that's synced over from the phone. And then under workouts is where you can take a look at the different sports. It includes walking, running, outdoor cycling, indoor cycling, and that's it. So the number of sports are pretty limited. I see just 4 of them. This is advertised as a GPS running watch. Perhaps the emphasis here will be on doing things that require you to log your path on a map. And so those are the sports that seems to have the priority on the Y2. And then it just loops back onto this main menu. But overall, working pretty well in terms of the smoothness. I can swipe up to take a look at my quick shortcuts for things like the battery remaining, very quickly changing the brightness just by tapping there, a do not disturb mode, and airplane mode, which will turn off the Bluetooth, and then I can also swipe down to take a look at notifications, which have been synced over from the phone. Now the 2 crown keys, by the way, the top one can actually physically turn off the screen, and the bottom one acts as a back key that returns you into this main home screen. Jump cut after using the watch over the past week, so a closer look here with more activity data populated. This is what it looks like in terms of your daily goal for steps, calories, and distance. It's pretty attractive in terms of the UI UX, and it also pairs and syncs the data over using Bluetooth very quickly once you open up the app. And I can also tap on sleep, for instance, to see the last night's sleep. Speaking of, in terms of the accuracy of the sensors, in terms of the sleep tracking, it's decent, but it isn't a 24-hour tracking, which means if you take a nap during the afternoon, for example, it's not going to recognize that as sleep. However, if you fall asleep typically at night, wake up in the morning, it will show you those patterns and tell you your light sleep versus deep sleep, as well as how it compares against your weekly average, as well as your monthly average. So it shows you quite a bit of detail that you can play around with. In terms of heart rate, it will also tell you your heart rate average. The watch can even send you a notification saying that you should probably stop and seek some medical attention if it's detected that your heart rate is too high or too low. Now, under the watch face, I also want to point out that in addition to the ones that we looked at installed on the watch, you can also send custom watch faces over as well, which is a pretty neat feature. You can create your own watch faces just by tapping here and choosing a color scheme as well as a wallpaper that you may have from your own libraries. And we can also tap on a kind of layout method of where we want the time to be. So for each of these grids, we can tap on them to display different information, like the time, for instance, and even change the color of the time as well. The next area here can display things like battery, for instance. So you can customize the way that these grids are laid out and even interchange them or delete them altogether. Tap on next to kind of change the color, for example. So surprisingly, lots of good customization options coming from a budget smartwatch. And here's again the activity dial for the past day that has been filled out with more visualizations. Another neat thing that I discovered here was under alarms, you also have the ability to set up alarms directly on the watch itself, which is not something a lot of these budget smartwatches have. Typically they rely on you having to sync that information over from the smartphone app. Here's what it looks like for the sleep. For the past week, it shows all of that data in terms of how much of your goal you've met. In terms of the GPS tracking, it also indeed works as expected. The signal is pretty good thanks to the polycarbonate frame. Usually it will get a lock with a GPS signal within a minute or two. If you're indoors, of course, it'll be much more difficult, but you also have the ability to either turn on GPS or turn it off. Once started, it will also tell you things like your GPS signal reception, as well as your continuous heart rate, your pace in terms of how fast you're going, and after the session is saved, you'll be able to see that data in terms of the path on your phone once you sync it over. Overall, what it boils down to is I'm actually very impressed by this budget smartwatch, giving you, again, a real integrated GPS chip, everything working in a pretty robust way, the watch itself feeling lightweight and comfortable. You can wear it and kind of forget that it's even there on your wrist because of how light it is, and it feels breathable, it doesn't draw too much attention, you can see notifications and time very easily, and also has plenty of customization for things like watch faces, how you want the widgets to be displayed in terms of the information can also be customized, access to lots of controls, and visualizations which are a bit more detailed than many other budget watches I've seen in the past. So it all boils down to a great value, I think, at this low price of only around 35 bucks. So if you're interested, you can check out more details in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the LEFIT GPS smartwatch.